Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I inherited my grandfather's crumbling cabin, I expected solitude, fresh air, a quiet lake, maybe peace of mind. What I got instead was a war with an HOA, a clipboard-wielding tyrant, and the ultimate courtroom showdown over who truly owned paradise. When my grandfather died, I didn't cry. I didn't really know how. He wasn't the hugging type or the let's go fishing kind of grandpa. He was quiet, razor sharp, a man who read property law the way others read the Sunday comics. But he left me something better than bedtime stories. He left me a cabin. And not just any cabin, but a run-down wooden box on the edge of a lake that looked like it hadn't seen a hammer since the Reagan administration. I was 36, working remote as a real estate attorney out of a beige apartment in Dallas, and the idea of escaping to a private lake retreat felt like trading migraines for fresh pine air. So when the paperwork cleared and the title landed in my inbox, I packed a toolbox, a cooler, and drove 3 hours into the woods with more excitement than I'd care to admit in court. The first time I saw the cabin, it was rough. The porch had a lean like it owed someone money, the dock was missing a few teeth, and the solar panels on the roof were about as functional as a chocolate teapot. But it was mine. The lake shimmered behind it like a secret too good to share, and there was this quiet, this deep, satisfying silence that wrapped around your ribs and made you forget about email chains and HOA fine print. I started coming up every weekend. I'd fix something small each time, replace a railing, seal a window, wire in new panels. My grandfather had left behind crates of hand-labeled documents in the attic, and I spent nights going through them like archaeological treasure. Deeds, water rights, land use permits from the 70s. The man documented everything. I started to understand how deeply he'd structured ownership of this place. It wasn't just a cabin, it was a fortress disguised as a shack. The property sat at the edge of a development called Bluewood Shores, a lakeside HOA neighborhood filled with bright paint, pastel kayaks, and people who waved just a little too hard. I wasn't part of it, never had been. My grandfather's land had been grandfathered out, no pun intended, long before the developers paved their first fake cobblestone path. That didn't stop a few curious residents from wandering over. One morning, I was patching a broken step when a guy in jogger shorts and mirrored sunglasses slowed his run to ask, "Hey, are you renting this place? We didn't think anyone lived out here." "Nope, I own it," I replied, wiping sawdust off my jeans. He gave me a half nod and jogged off like I'd answered incorrectly. It wasn't just him. A woman walking a golden retriever let it pee on my canoe. A couple of teenagers parked in the gravel lot next to the cabin to make out like it was Lover's Lane. And every now and then, some kid would come down with a fishing rod like my dock was a public amenity. At first, I didn't mind. Let 'em fish. Let 'em think the lot was public. I figured they just didn't know better. That was my mistake. The gravel parking area next to the cabin got more crowded every week. Minivans, Subarus, SUVs, all with HOA decals. One Saturday, I counted 10 cars and a folding canopy with Bluewood swim team spray-painted across it. I hadn't even realized I'd stepped into their claimed territory, but as far as I was concerned, I was on solid legal ground. Literally, the land was mine. The cabin, the dock, the gravel lot, and even the lake itself. Artificially dug and filled in the 70s, with a perfectly filed water use registration to prove it. My grandfather didn't do anything halfway. Still, something in the air felt off. Friendly waves turned into narrowed eyes. Conversations cut off when I walked by. Someone posted a flyer on a nearby bulletin board about preserving community values. I didn't pay much attention. Not then. I had repairs to finish and peace to enjoy. Let the neighborhood whisper. But I should have known. Peace never lasts long when HOAs get curious. The envelope was unmarked. No stamp, no official seal. Just slipped into the mailbox like a passive-aggressive note from a nosy neighbor. Which, as it turned out, wasn't far from the truth. Inside was a single-typed page, printed in Times New Roman, like someone had Googled official font. It read, "Dear occupant, our records indicate that your current construction and occupancy at 14 Lakeside Drive is in violation of Bluewood Shores HOA Architectural and Residency Guidelines. As such, we ask that you cease development and vacate the premises until your residence has been reviewed and approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Sincerely, Bluewood Shores Homeowners Association. No letterhead, no signature, no return address. Just Bluewood Shores Homeowners Association, acting like they were the sheriff of Knott Lake County. I stood there in the sunlight, reading the letter twice before letting out a slow breath. I wasn't surprised. Mildly amused, maybe. The HOA had been circling like curious vultures ever since I started working on the cabin. They didn't like anything unapproved on their borders. And apparently, a man fixing up his dead grandfather's property was a threat to their sense of symmetry. I tossed the letter into the glove box of my truck. If they wanted to play paperwork games, they'd picked the wrong person. I'd spent 10 years writing real estate contracts tight enough to choke a snake, but I wasn't going to dignify an unsigned letter with a response. Not yet. A week later, I got another one, this time certified mail. Karen was stepping up her game. Mr. Rand, you have failed to register your residence and are currently in breach of zoning provisions as outlined by Bluewood Shores HOA jurisdiction. Your presence on site and continued unapproved development constitute actionable violations. You are required to vacate immediately and seek review for reoccupancy. Karen Wells, President, Bluewood Shores HOA. This one had her name on it. Progress. I read it over coffee, sitting on the cabin's repaired porch, watching a family of ducks paddle through the mist on my lake. I didn't even get angry. It was like watching someone try to repossess a mountain because it looks like part of the park. Later that afternoon, the woman herself showed up. Karen Wells, mid-50s, hair in a perfect blonde helmet, khakis ironed to military standards, and carrying a clipboard like she was born holding it. She approached the cabin like a city inspector on a mission to condemn. "Mr. Rand," she called out. I looked up from where I was installing new solar connectors. "Yes?" "I'm Karen Wells. I'm the president of the Bluewood Shores HOA. I stood up, dusted off my hands, and smiled politely. "Pleasure. I'm here to inform you that your structure is non-compliant with the Bluewood Shores Architectural Code. We have standards here." "That's nice," I said, "but I'm not in Bluewood Shores." Her smile didn't move. "Your property borders the lake. That lake is considered a shared community asset. Your cabin has visual impact on community space, and your gravel drive appears to cross HOA-maintained land." "It doesn't," I said calmly. "The lake isn't public. It's a private reservoir built and registered in 1974. My grandfather owned it. Now I do." She blinked, then gave a tight little laugh like I'd told a joke in poor taste. "That's impossible. Our records show that Bluewood Shores has had lake access and usage rights since the community was developed." "Show me," I said, "because I've seen every recorded deed and plat for this property." "There's no such agreement." She didn't show me anything. Instead, she changed tactics. "Mr. Rand, I don't think you understand how things work here. We have procedures, guidelines. You can't just move in and start building like it's the Wild West." I smiled again, slower this time. "Karen, with all due respect, I'm a real estate attorney. I do understand how things work, and I'm telling you, this is private land. That community lake access you think you have, you don't. And that gravel lot your residents have been using as a weekend parking zone, that's mine too." Her nostrils flared. "This isn't over." "I didn't think it would be." She turned on her heel and walked back up the path like she owned it. I watched her disappear through the trees, clipboard clutched like a sword, and I knew this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding resolved by a chat over lemonade. This was the first knock on the door of a war. The banner was the first thing I saw, bright blue with yellow letters that screamed Bluewood Family Lake Day. It was strung between two poles like a county fair had set up shop on my land. A dozen cars were crammed into the gravel lot, most of them bearing Bluewood Shores parking tags on their mirrors. Beyond them, I could see folding chairs, beach towels, coolers, and a pop-up tent billowing in the breeze. Kids were running in and out of the water. Someone had dragged a Bluetooth speaker down by the dock and was blasting upbeat country music like we were in the middle of some kind of lakeside jamboree. I pulled my truck up slowly, put it in park, and just sat there for a moment, letting the absurdity wash over me. They were having a party, on my land, without a single word to me. I stepped out, walked across the lot like I was approaching a crime scene, which, in a way, I was, and scanned the crowd for anything that resembled leadership. Most people were too busy grilling hot dogs and yelling at their kids to notice me. A couple of teenagers saw me and nudged each other, whispering. I recognized a few faces from around the neighborhood, and then I saw her. Karen Wells in a white sun hat and a sleeveless blouse, standing near the lake with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a cup of lemonade in the other. She looked like she was hosting a charity gala. She was smiling, laughing, talking with two other women, clearly in her element. For a second, I wondered if she'd brought a podium. I approached her calmly, hands in my pockets. "Karen," I said evenly. She turned, saw me, and gave a tight photogenic smile like I was just another guest. "Oh, Austin, I'm so glad you came by. Isn't it a beautiful day for a gathering?" "You're on private property," I said. Her smile didn't fade. "We're simply enjoying a long-standing community tradition. This lake has been part of our neighborhood's summer events for years. You should join in. Get to know everyone." "I'm not here to mingle," I said. "I'm here to tell you that you're trespassing. Every person here is. You didn't ask for permission, you didn't give notice, and you set up equipment on land you don't own." She let out a little laugh, like I'd said something quaint. "Oh, come on. No one's hurting anything. The lake is for everyone." "No," I said, my voice hardening. "It's not. The lake, the dock, the gravel lot, this is all part of my grandfather's estate. I own it now. You've been using it without permission. That ends today." Her expression froze. The smile stayed, but the warmth evaporated. "You're being very hostile." "I'm being very clear." She stepped closer. "You may have a piece of paper that says you own it, but the community has a relationship with this land. That means something." I didn't flinch. "Then your relationship just changed." For a long second, we just stared at each other. Her jaw worked like she wanted to say something clever, but nothing came. Then, with practiced poise, she turned toward the crowd, raised her lemonade like a hostess at a banquet, and said, "Let's wrap up soon, folks. We'll continue our activities elsewhere next week." People started packing up. Slowly, grudgingly. A few shot me dirty looks like I'd canceled Christmas. Someone muttered something about lawyers ruining everything. I ignored it. I wasn't here to win a popularity contest. As the last car pulled out, I stood in the middle of the gravel lot listening to the sudden quiet. My dock was wet. My lawn was trampled. There were juice boxes and a half-deflated beach ball stuck in the reeds. I took a long breath and walked back to the cabin. That evening, I typed up a formal notice revoking any presumed community access to my property. I included parcel numbers, legal descriptions, and a warning that future violations would be met with trespassing charges. Then I printed 20 copies and mailed them to the HOA board, city zoning, and Karen personally. The next morning, I went back with a contractor and installed 2 large metal signs at the entrance to the lot and by the dock. Private property, no trespassing, no lake access. Then I called a local fencing company and ordered a chain barrier with a locking gate for the driveway. They gave me an install date 2 weeks out. Until then, I'd keep my phone close and my patients closer. I figured they'd take the hint. 2 bright metal signs. Legal notices mailed and certified. A clear public revocation of access. I had done everything short of building a moat. But HOA people don't take hints. They take offense. It started 3 days after the Lake Day debacle. I woke up to a knock on my cabin door. First time someone had ever come right up the steps uninvited. I opened it to find a man in his 40s, tall, tanned, and clearly trying to look casual in a golf shirt and sandals. He introduced himself as Greg, a member of the Bluewood Shores HOA board. "Hey there, Austin," he said, too friendly. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" "I do, actually," I replied, stepping out and closing the door behind me. He forced a chuckle. "Right, well, no problem. I just wanted to chat real quick. There's been some concern in the community." I crossed my arms. "About what? The fact that people can't trespass anymore?" He raised his hands. "Look, man, I get it. You're a lawyer, and you've got your rights. No one's disputing that? Well, not officially, but you're shaking up a lot of people. The lake's part of the lifestyle here. Folks bought homes thinking they'd have access." "Then they were misled," I said flatly. "And they can take that up with whoever sold them the dream." He hesitated, then tried a new angle. "Karen wants to avoid escalation. She's proposing a community discussion. Maybe you could work something out? A limited access agreement? Karen can put that in writing and mail it to my office like a grown adult," I said. "I'm not negotiating through backdoor messengers." Greg gave a tight nod, muttered something about hoping cooler heads would prevail, and walked off with the kind of smile people wear before reporting you to the homeowners gossip group chat. The next morning, I found a glossy flyer on my truck windshield. "Save our lake," it screamed in bold caps. "A cherished Bluewood tradition is under threat. Join the rally this Saturday at 10 a.m. at the community lot. Stand up for your right to access the lake we all love." Below that was a photo of the lake, my lake, and a quote from Karen Wells about aggressive privatization and outsiders abusing legal loopholes. Outsider. That one stung more than I expected. Saturday came fast. I drove up early and parked my truck at the front of the gravel lot, blocking vehicle access. I brought a camp chair, a thermos of black coffee, and a hard copy folder of land records in case anyone decided to ask for proof. By 10 o'clock, they arrived. 24 residents, give or take. Most were older, retired couples, PTA veterans, the type of people who ran bake sales with an iron fist. Some held hand-painted signs. One read, "Let kids swim." Another just said, "No to greed." Karen stood near the front, flanked by 2 local reporters with notepads. I stayed silent while they chanted for about 15 minutes. No one crossed the fence line, probably because I was sitting next to it with a GoPro running. Eventually, Karen approached. "Is this how you want to live?" she asked. "Blocking children from nature? Turning neighbors into enemies?" "I want to live on land that's mine without people acting like I stole it," I said. "You've used it for years without permission. That ends now." She smirked. "We'll see what the court says." I look forward to it. The next day, I received a thick envelope from a law firm out of town. Karen had filed a lawsuit in county court requesting injunctive relief, alleging that the lake was a de facto public resource due to customary use and long-standing community access. They even claimed the gravel lot had easement by necessity. Cute. I scanned the documents, took some notes, and began drafting my response. I didn't just refute their claims. I prepared a counterclaim for unauthorized land use, trespassing, and back payment for a full decade of illegal use of my land. And, just for good measure, I contacted a local security company to install motion-activated floodlights, a second camera at the dock, and a new keypad entry system on the access gate. The password: private. The summons came with the predictable weight of faux professionalism, blue ink signatures, embossed letterhead, a courier who couldn't make eye contact when he handed it over. Karen Wells and the Bluewood Shores Homeowners Association were suing me in county court for obstruction of public access, unjust enrichment, and, my personal favorite, willful community destabilization. That last one sounded like something out of a CIA file. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the neat stacks of documents my grandfather had preserved like religious relics, and read through their complaint. They claimed the lake had always been used by the community, that the HOA had invested in beautification efforts around the shoreline, and that the gravel parking lot had been maintained in good faith as a public utility for over a decade. They wanted the court to declare the land part of a shared municipal resource, and somehow I was the villain. I didn't waste time. I filed a formal response within 48 hours. Denial of all claims, request for dismissal, and a counterclaim for unauthorized use of private property, trespassing, exploitation of land for HOA-sponsored events without consent, negligent damage to natural shoreline, and a retroactive usage claim, 12 years of unpaid access to the gravel lot, calculated as standard daily municipal parking rates. Total requested damages, $140,000. My counterclaim hit like a brick. Within a week, their legal team filed a motion to suppress the financial damages. It was denied. The court set a preliminary hearing for the following month. When the day came, I wore a tailored gray suit and brought copies of everything: plats, deeds, tax records, archival photographs of the lake in '74, with my grandfather standing knee-deep in the mud, holding a shovel and grinning like he'd just finished building his kingdom. Every document notarized, every map color-coded and indexed. Karen showed up in ivory white, with matching heels, and a lawyer who looked like he got his JD off a wine bottle label. She strutted into the courthouse like it was a fashion event. Her entourage followed: Greg from the HOA board, 2 older residents, and, of course, a local journalist scribbling notes with cartoonish interest. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, opened with questions about jurisdiction. Karen's lawyer tried to argue the lake was functionally public by way of historical access. I handed over a certified survey dated from 1974, a county water use registration with my grandfather's name on it, and a chain of title report confirming unbroken private ownership ever since. Karen's lawyer stammered something about verbal agreements. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have documentation? No, Your Honor, but there were long-standing understandings. Understandings are not legally binding, she cut in. Do you have signed agreements, permits, servitudes, right-of-way declarations, anything at all? He hesitated. Not currently, but we can produce witness statements. She nodded. Which are hearsay until substantiated. Proceed. It got worse for them. I submitted HOA financial reports obtained via public records request showing budget line items labeled shoreline maintenance and community lake access signage on property they didn't own. I included photos of the Bluewood Family Lake Day event they'd hosted, featuring banners, tents, and collected donations, all on my land. Karen went pale when that image hit the courtroom screen. The judge scheduled a formal trial date and refused to dismiss my counterclaim. As we were leaving the courtroom, Karen brushed past me in the hallway and hissed, "You think this is a win? It's just the beginning." I smiled. Good. I like long games. The court date approached like a loaded gun on a kitchen table. Quiet, still, and impossible to ignore. By the time the trial opened, I had enough documentation to bury an entire HOA. My files were meticulously organized, labeled down to the inch. I wasn't showing up to prove a point. I was showing up to finish a job. The courtroom was fuller this time. Word had gotten around. Local reporters filled the gallery. A few Bluewood residents came to support their community cause. Faces pinched with the same forced optimism you see in people waiting to hear whether a biopsy is benign. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table dressed like a politician mid-scandal. Sharp blazer, white pearls, and a posture so rigid I wondered if she was afraid to break. Her lawyer opened with passion and no paperwork. He argued customary use, historic enjoyment, and community value, waving his arms like his argument could somehow fill the void of actual legal standing. He even quoted from a local newspaper editorial that Karen herself had probably ghost-written, something about the soul of Bluewood Shores. I let him talk. The longer he painted my land as a public park, the better it would sting when I brought the scalpel. My turn came. I submitted the full geodetic survey conducted by a licensed firm just 3 months prior. It clearly outlined the property lines, marked every inch of shoreline, and confirmed what I already knew. The HOA's so-called lake access was smack in the middle of my land. Then came the fun part. I entered into evidence a folder of internal HOA emails, courtesy of a whistleblower on the board who'd grown tired of Karen's antics. One thread, dated 3 years ago, had the subject line, "Can we keep using the lot?" Inside, Karen had written, "We don't technically have recorded rights, but no one's challenged us in years. If we stay quiet, there's no need to stir things up." The judge asked her counsel, "Do you dispute the authenticity of this communication?" Karen's lawyer paled. "No, Your Honor." Next, I played footage from my security system. Karen's brother, yes, the one who had lounged on my porch during their unauthorized retreat, was caught hauling lawn furniture across my dock while whistling and sipping from a can of White Claw. Another clip showed an HOA organized group erecting temporary signage that read Bluewood Shores Recreation Zone. Then came the financials. A forensic accountant I hired walked the court through HOA budget line items labeled lake upkeep, parking lot resurfacing, and shoreline event prep. They had spent thousands of resident dollars maintaining land they didn't own, and worse, collecting dues based on those presumed amenities. The judge called for a recess. Karen left the room like she was headed for her own execution. When the court resumed, I brought out the nail in the coffin, my grandfather's original correspondence with the county, including a notarized letter from 1974, where he explicitly denied any public access rights to the lake and gravel lot. It included a handwritten note, "If someone wants to use my land, they better bring a deed, not a smile." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Karen tried to salvage the moment. She stood, uninvited, and launched into a desperate monologue about what the lake meant to the community, how her father helped plant trees there, and how no one ever told them they couldn't use it. The judge listened with the kind of polite boredom that only decades of courtroom experience can teach. When she finally spoke, her voice was cool and final. "This isn't about sentiment, it's about property, and the plaintiff has provided no documentation to support their claims." In fact, the evidence suggests they knowingly misrepresented the land's status to their residents and collected fees on false pretenses. Karen sat down like her legs had stopped working. Before closing, my attorney submitted an amended motion, a fraud allegation against the HOA board for knowingly misrepresenting access rights in their own community materials. The judge allowed it to proceed to a separate hearing. We walked out of the courtroom to a wall of flashbulbs. Karen didn't speak to reporters. She ducked into her car and slammed the door so hard it startled a bird from a lamppost. I stood on the courthouse steps, documents in hand, and breathed in deep. I wasn't finished, but Bluewood Shores just found out I didn't come here to negotiate. I came to clean house. The verdict came on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of day that smelled like wet pavement and paperwork. I arrived at the courthouse early, coffee in hand, not nervous, just ready. I hadn't come this far to lose sleep over people who built their empire on borrowed dirt. Karen arrived fashionably late and visibly rattled. No entourage this time, no clipboard, no lipstick armor. Just her and the same tired lawyer who looked like he'd spent the night reading law blogs and praying for a miracle. There were fewer spectators in the gallery now. I guess the spectacle had dulled, or people just didn't want to watch their HOA burn in real time. The judge wasted no time. In the matter of Bluewood Shores Homeowners Association versus Austin Rand, she began, the court finds in favor of the defendant and grants full recognition of his counterclaims. Karen didn't even flinch. She just stared ahead like her brain had disconnected from her body. The court further affirms that the lake and associated gravel lot in question are the sole private property of Mr. Rand, with no recorded or implied rights of access granted to the plaintiff, its members, or associated third parties. That was the formal part. The rest was salt in the wound. In addition, due to sustained unauthorized use of private land for HOA events, recreational activities, and parking, and after reviewing the defendant's submitted financial analysis, the court awards monetary damages totaling $190,000 to Mr. Rand. This includes calculated rental value of the gravel lot and assessed damages for misuse of shoreline property. Karen's lawyer shifted like his seat had become electrified. And finally, the judge added, the court imposes a civil penalty of $50,000 on the HOA for knowingly misrepresenting property status in member communications and financial disclosures. These funds are to be paid into a local public trust for community restitution. Silence. Absolute. The sound of a gavel echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Karen stood up slowly. Her expression was blank, like the verdict hadn't landed yet. Her lawyer tried to speak with her, but she waved him off, walked stiffly past my bench, and didn't say a word. As I exited the building, a few reporters tried to corner me for a quote. I gave them a brief line. The law is clear, even when people pretend it's not. Then I got in my truck and left. But the real aftermath didn't happen in court. It happened in the HOA's own clubhouse 2 nights later. Word got around fast. Residents received a full summary of the ruling, complete with the judge's remarks and a breakdown of how much of their dues had gone into fighting a war they didn't know they were losing. An emergency board meeting was held, and for the first time in HOA history, it was standing room only. Multiple residents called for Karen's resignation. One woman stood up and read aloud from the internal emails I had submitted in court. Someone else asked where the shoreline beautification money really went. By the end of the night, Karen was removed by vote, unanimously. Greg tried to rally support, but no one wanted to hear it. Not after what came out. Not after the fines. Not after they learned they'd been lied to for over a decade. The board collapsed like a house of cards with a broken foundation. As for me, I received my settlement check 2 weeks later. I deposited it without ceremony and filed a lien on the HOA in case they missed a payment. They wouldn't. Not now. Not with their dirty laundry flapping in the wind. A month after the verdict, the lake was quiet again. No more impromptu parties. No flyers. No pastel kayaks left abandoned on the shoreline like colorful regrets. Just the still water, the hum of cicadas, and the familiar creak of the old dock under my boots. Peace, not just restored, but enforced. The first thing I did was post new signage, not just the generic private property warnings. No, this time I went for clarity. 2 metal plaques professionally mounted and worded like contract clauses. This lake and adjacent land are private property. Used by non-licensees constitutes trespassing. HOA affiliated access strictly prohibited. I debated adding a smiley face, but I figured subtlety would serve me better in the long run. Next came the permit system. I partnered with a small local platform to issue digital access licenses, seasonal, individual, revocable, at my discretion. Limited fishing and kayaking privileges, no parties, no music after 8, and absolutely no affiliation with any homeowners association. The price? Affordable, unless you were on Karen's old mailing list. Then it got steeper. I also filed the full land records into a public registry database, indexed for ease of access. No more arguments about customary use. Anyone with Wi-Fi and a brain could see the truth. The irony? A few neighbors actually reached out to thank me. Apparently not everyone loved the HOA's grip. One guy, Bill, said he'd spent a decade paying extra fees just to avoid Karen's wrath. Another family admitted they'd always suspected the lake wasn't technically theirs, but had been too nervous to speak up. I didn't throw a victory party. I didn't feel like celebrating. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something that belonged to my family and making sure no one stole it with a fake smile and a clipboard. But I did make one final addition. Right at the edge of the gravel lot facing the road, I installed a weatherproof wooden sign. Simple black lettering, carved deep. Cabin, lake, lot, all mine. Next person who tries to evict me better know how to fish. With a lawsuit. I don't know if Karen ever saw it. After her removal, she disappeared from Bluewood entirely. Rumor has it, she moved to Arizona to start fresh, which I assume means avoid being recognized at the grocery store. I wish her peace. At a very distant lake. As for the HOA, what was left of it limped along under new leadership, quiet, apologetic, and a lot less interested in other people's property. Last I checked, they'd slashed their fees and disbanded the Architecture and Community Aesthetics Committee, which felt like a fitting funeral. I still come up most weekends. Sometimes I fish. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just sit on the dock and watch the sky change colors over the water my grandfather built with his bare hands and iron will. He didn't believe in trusting people blindly. Now I understand why. This land is mine. Not because I said so, but because I proved it. Line by line, document by document, inch by stubborn inch. And if anyone ever forgets that again, well, I've got the sign. And I've still got the receipts.